Yes, the Vanquish Group now have our own podcast. The first series is about Michael Chandler's latest book, The Art of Protection. Across the interviews, I asked Michael the generic and obvious questions about close protection, surveillance, intelligence, etc. But I also asked some really in-depth questions about the nuances of all the above, including some psychological elements pertaining to counter-surveillance and intelligence, as well as some real-life examples from his career. In this series, Michael came into each interview with no script, no preview of the questions, just the understanding that they relate to his book. The result? Honest, unscripted answers drawn entirely from his own knowledge and experience. Some of the responses are brief, others are more in-depth, but all are spontaneous and authentic. We hope you enjoy. Hello, and welcome to the first episode of The Art of Protection, where the author and I discuss all things related to close protection, utilizing designated, incidental, and counterintelligence. In this episode, I asked Michael a number of questions about the book itself and the courses and Michael's career. We also discussed other topics including controlling adrenaline, women in close protection, high and low profile protection, what advice he'd give to someone looking to get into close protection, and lastly, Michael's biggest regret. I hope you enjoy the episode. So, Michael, welcome.
Thank you.
So you're the Chief Operating Officer of the Vanquish Group.
Yes.
Which is a very successful company, one of the fastest growing, right, in Sydney and Hong Kong?
One of the fastest growing in our sector in the world, but I think that's only because it's very, very niche.
Okay, so explain to us more about the Vanquish Group.
So the Vanquish Group is essentially, it's a group company, obviously. It's kind of like a holding company because what it does, it owns and manages certain brands that operate in one of three key sectors: security, intelligence, education. So for example, security sort of sect, as it were, in those three categories, we have the security company, which provides bodyguard services to ultra high net worth, celebrities, and all the rest of it. In terms of intelligence, we have one of the largest, if not the largest, bug sweeping company in the world, which is TSM International. We have an investigation company that investigates fraud and other matters. And then we have, education-wise, Vanquish Training Academy and the Security Academy. So in essence, it's a group company that owns and manages different and a diverse portfolio of businesses, but ultimately all fit within one of those three categories.
And how did this all come together?
So so it wasn't the Vanquish Group initially. The first company we had was something called Vanquish Security and Investigation Consultants, which was incorporated in 2011. So this year, we're in 2025, we are 14 years old. It was set up to obviously be a security company. The provision of bodyguard services was our main goal, main focus. But it's a very, very competitive market. So what we were hoping to do was introduce sort of intelligence/investigation side of the business, but that would go hand in hand with the security effort. So for example, if one of our clients received a threat, then we would be able to understand or ascertain where that threat's coming from, who's responsible. And so that's why it was one business with two kind of security and investigation consultants. As time progressed, we decided it was better to kind of separate the businesses. So security and investigations are two complete separate entities. And by the way, the investigation company did very, very well. It was the biggest biggest cash generating business we had at the time in the UK. And after a period of time, we had different requests for different services. Bug sweeping was one of them that we had a couple of requests for that I had a good, I was quite knowledgeable in the area, but the company wasn't really set up for it, I don't think. And after more requests, we kind of made a decision, so we need to sort of do this. So we did it as part of the investigation company to start off with. And I think it was 2019, we created an individual brand because what people were concerned about, I think, was an investigation company doing bug sweeping is a sort of contradiction in terms. If someone is looking for bugs in their house, they would potentially be planted by an investigator or a detective of some kind or whatever it is. So we moved it over to the security company, and then they sort of decided it wasn't enough. So by creating its own individual brand, bug sweeping only, if you will, we thought that might be better. So we did that, and we called it TSM International. We had it registered as a trademark. And then I can't remember if the book came out first. Excuse me. I can't remember if the book came out first or after the launch of that brand. But the book really, really helped. The book really took things off. So I didn't think the book would sell that well, honestly. It was written.
It was your first book.
It's my first book. It's called Technical Surveillance Countermeasures, which is what TSCM stands for.
Yeah.
And it's the endeavor of looking for covert monitoring devices. When the book launched, the business kind of took off in a different direction, really, because I was asked to sort of do the training program that the book is based upon in different parts of the world. So I did the first ever bug sweeping course, civilian bug sweeping course in Australia. I was responsible for that along with my colleague, Joey Saab, who owns Active Countermeasures in Australia. And then I was asked to do the same in Ghana for the Ghanaian government, the BNI, which is the Bureau of National Investigation. It's like the FBI, but in Ghana.
Yeah.
So that was the first there as well. But as a result, obviously, the sort of recognition of the brand and everything else sort of increased and improved.
So this is developed from your career. So we'll touch briefly on your career, because obviously this is all about you. And the Vanquish Group was developed from your career. Obviously, I've researched your career and I actually find it very inspiring. Well done. And obviously what you've got from that is very successful. So just tell us briefly, before we get into, obviously you're on your third book now, which is amazing. But before we get into that, just briefly about your career, like what actually inspired you? This is a question from me, to get into close protection, security. But where did it all begin, basically?
You know, the funny thing is, I think as a young child and then as a sort of younger man, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. Like most kids do. My son is 18 nearly, and he doesn't know what he wants to do. He has no clue. I was exactly the same way into my 20s. Excuse me. But what I did know is I wanted to have a sort of wide-ranging career, something that would have different elements to it. So I was always interested in the sort of medical world. I was always interested in the idea of traveling, and just not being in one place all the time. Working in an office environment wasn't for me. I decided that, I sort of ascertained that quite early on. So I wanted something that was just different. Now, you have to understand where I sort of grew up and everything, but wanting to be a bodyguard was just a complete, it was such a bizarre and outlandish thing to suggest that people would laugh. And they didn't mean in bad way. I would have laughed at the person if someone said it to me.
Can I ask, well, that in your book you refer to close protection rather than bodyguard. Is that a thing? Or do we still say bodyguard?
So bodyguard is just easier to say, I think. But the British, at some point, it's a military term, honestly, and it's a British military term, I think. It stems from the British military. Close protection is the endeavour of protecting an individual. So yeah, it is a body. So bodyguard and being a close protection officer is exactly the same thing. For some reason, as times progress, I think I deal with a lot of people who aren't English speaking. Bodyguard is probably the term they would know more.
Yeah.
It's only us, the Canadians, Americans, and the Australians really that use close protection. So yeah, using the word bodyguard is something I've now become sort of pro par with. So I tend to use bodyguard more than close protection,
Yeah.
but it is the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, going back, I mean, it's just because I wanted a different element to my career. I didn't want to be in an office doing one particular thing. So bodyguard was a strange thing to want to do. So what I did is I looked at, obviously, I knew that having a military background would be beneficial. So I did some research. Turns out the regiment that does close protection within the British Armed Forces is the Royal Military Police.
Yeah.
So I joined the Royal Military Police. So I tried to join the regulars. I'm numerically dyslexic.
I mean, what age were you when you joined?
I mean, in my 20s, I was...
It's quite intense going into that at a 20-year-old, right?
Well, I think most people join the military when they're 16, 17.
Yeah.
So I was a little bit older, actually. But my plan was to join the regulars, so the full-time British Army, as it were. And the issue with the Royal Military Police, you have to do an IQ, what they call BARB test, but it's an IQ test. And you also have to have GCSEs in English, I think, and maths. And I had all the GCSEs apart from maths because I suffer from something called dyscalculia, numerically dyslexic. There was no way I was never going to pass a maths exam, right? So GCSEs, I think I got a D or something, just probably for turning up coursework. Anyway, long story short, they said to me, look, you can't join the regulars. You join the TA if you want to, and then do an operational tour, Iraq, Afghanistan, and then you can kind of go through the proverbial back door into the regulars. So I did all of that. And the idea was to progress into the close protection unit. So as I was doing I did my basic training, passed that as a trained soldier, and I did my military police training. And as I was coming to the end of it, someone made an accusation. It's a really long story, but in the long and short of it is this: I didn't actually go into the full-time regulars. I didn't do an operational tour of duty, which I seriously regret. It's one of my biggest regrets in life. But yeah, so from that, I still had a good military experience. I did 4 years, all right, albeit part-time tier, whatever. But then I started working in the sort of celebrity market, which then progressed into working with, different sort of families. But just to quickly go back a step, because when I came out the TA at the army or whatever, I did a civilian training program, which for a close protection course, it was very much largely focused on intelligence acquisition, which is like usually things like covert surveillance, all that kind of stuff. But that was quite unique back then. And in fact, arguably, it probably was the only course that did that, whereas all the other courses were just sort of, being the bodyguard, as it were. And it was quite a long course. My course was 28 days, sorry. And most courses were, I think at the time, 12 to 14 days. And there was an incident that happened. We could talk about probably at another time, but when I was doing the celebrity stuff, it kind of led me down a different career path where I started doing more covert observations and things like that, rather than just bodyguarding. And then my career kind of took a bit of an unusual turn. So the celebrity marketing thing was great, but it was flooded, honestly, because I had those not unique qualifications, but they were slightly unusual. So I was able to go into the sort of more serious stuff where people had actually received threats, and I did do that, and I ended up working with.
Because I read an article that was in the Daily Mail, it was really interesting. It said you had like a kidnap threat. Would you say that was one of your biggest challenges in that part of your career? Or that's a question that I was going to ask. What would you say in the peak of your career? What's the biggest challenge that you'd have faced, really?
Do you know what? I'll be honest with you. I've been quite lucky, I think, with regards to incidents at work.
Yeah.
We've had, so there have been 2 kidnap incidents. There was one where it was a high-profile individual. Everyone would know this person, and his daughter had been threatened with a kidnap. And that was quite serious because no one, and including the police, they didn't know who was responsible. So all we could do was what we called protective surveillance.
Protective surveillance.
Yeah, so it was known at the time as protective surveillance.
Yeah.
Which is, it's hard to explain, but it's very, very, very low profile protection. And we were based in a van outside the property, mounting observations, or ensuring that no vehicles were approaching, or if they were, we were logging them and all the rest of it. And that little girl had a kidnap threat on her for a long, long time. So I was involved with that for a little while. But then I was working for a Russian family. I worked with Russian families for a really long time.
Yeah.
Not as high profile, obviously. Some were very high profile, some less so. But one of the children was in his late teens, I think, at the time. He received a kidnap threat, which I'll be honest, off the record, well, not off the record because it's being recorded, but I don't think it was serious. We had to take serious, and the parents decided it was serious. So that was a case of, it happened whilst he was in one of the residences in London, and his friends were en route they were going to Russia that day. And long story short, there was a phone call, and I drove him straight to Farnborough. It's a private airfield, about an hour from where he lived. And he was put onto a jet, and that was it. He was straight to Moscow. The kidnap threat obviously stemmed from someone in the UK, but they thought they knew who was responsible. So that wasn't as wasn't as serious. There was one celebrity who he was famous. He was very well known, this guy, and he was being followed, and that turned out to be more serious than this, actually.
Really?
Because when they found the person who was responsible, he had duct tape, rope, and razor blades, and all sorts in the boob.
Wow.
So that was quite serious. But I mean, I've honestly been lucky. I've never had to deal with, which people have in our.
You have to be prepared for this, don't you?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, look, the UK. The funny about the UK. So
the UK is getting worse.
It's getting worse now, but I mean, we can't carry firearms in the UK.
No,
never have been able to, and I don't think we ever will be able to on as well. I don't know the way it's going, maybe, but it's getting more and more dangerous. But there's not much you can do to protect yourself. I mean, the best thing you can do is honestly wear body armor and not hoping for the best. Obviously, planning, preparation, everything the book's about kind of discusses how to avoid these kind of things. But there's only so much you can do.
And that's what I was going to touch on, that you don't mention firearms and you don't teach that in your courses, right?
No. So based on my learning, I wanted the course, and because we own intelligence brands as well, counterintelligence companies, we want it to be more intelligence led rather than just more security. So this is what tends to happen in the security industry, is that when someone receives a threat, security companies, not all of them, but generally speaking, they won't know what to do in terms of identifying who's responsible. So what they'll do is they'll just provide more security. That's their sort of response to it.
Yeah.
Be more proactively secure, right? Whereas our approach is we need to identify who's responsible. So yes, potentially we need more security with the individual, with the principal, but we also need to understand where this is coming from.
And find the cause.
Yeah, exactly. So I wanted the course to be about that. Also, if you look at all other training courses, that a lot of them are security, which is obviously important, but I wanted anything that I wrote to be slightly different, but as effective.
Yeah. So the third book's called The Art of Protection, as it is. Obviously, you've got the experience. We've just spoken about that. But what actually inspired you to name it The Art of Protection?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know the answer. Someone asked me this recently. I don't really know. I think
it is like generic, but I feel like there's more to it because obviously you've developed the protection course from this as well.
Yeah.
So the book must have more meaning behind it than just Art of Protection because there's way more to it.
In the second book, which is called The Real Guide to Surveillance, there's a quote in it that I wrote, obviously, that someone used on a training course that I'd seen. This training course came from an awarding body, and I'd seen that they'd used my terminology. And in the book, it says surveillance. I can't remember exactly, but basically, surveillance is an art form.
Yeah.
There's no set formula. And I quite like that. And I was going to call it the art of surveillance.
I just thought it's very like plays and brings on.
Exactly. So, and in the introduction of the book, The Art of Protection, it says that, bodyguarding is different every time. There's always something new. You have to deal with things dynamically. So it's not definitive. It's nothing set in stone. And it's different every time. Hence, The Art of Protection. I can't remember, even though I started writing this book 2.5 years ago. So I can't read from word to word. But yeah, it's something to that effect. So because it's different, because it's new, because it's dynamic, there's no set sort of procedures, as it were. Well, there are, but they don't always work out. So you have to be adaptive. So it's an art form. It's not like something I could go, yeah. So that's I think the reason behind the title. I think the other reason is because I don't want anything I write to be like, it could be called like Close Protection. I could have called it that. I don't think there are any other books called Close Protection.
No.
So I just wanted to be slightly different, but meaningful, like you said.
And would you say that obviously you mentioned in the book the ratio between theory and practical is really important?
I think so.
But this comes back to the name of The Art of Protection. Like you've just said that you don't know what's going to happen. It's an art. Not everything's the same. So how do you get the theory? Theory can only go so far though. So if I could have all the knowledge in the world and I could have been on your course and know everything, but thrown in a situation, I could literally go like, oh my God.
It's true. So the difficult thing is we're given a criteria by the government. So in any country you visit, the security industry is regulated. So what that means is anyone that provides bodyguard or whatever protective services, that they have to have a license. And that license will be given only after they're qualified. To get qualified, they need to be trained. So the training providers have to sort of abide by a set of rules or criteria. And that's getting bigger and bigger in the UK. And there's so much that needs to go in a short period of time.
Yeah.
So the minimum criteria is 12 days. Our course is always 21 days, but we want to pack so much theory in so that when they leave, they could practice the rest of their careers. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of training courses, what they tend to do is just more practice, which is good for some learners. But the reality is, if they don't understand the theory in order to get through their tests and their exams, they're not going to pass. And so we're trying to minimize the amount of times they have to go through their examination and actually appreciate what they learn on the course for a longer period of time. They can take notes, they can, of course, and I recognize that they have to do practical in order to understand that, Yanni, they have to.
But like you said as well was it dyslexia, did you say?
I'm the American dyslexic.
Yeah. So would someone like that, obviously you've had an amazing career, would someone like that struggle with your theory tests or would they still be?
A lot of people that come on our training programs are dyslexic.
Yeah.
There are allowances for people with conditions like dyslexia. We have our own mechanisms. We have, just to give you one example, we have like the pastel colored, and dyslexic people would not have been by this. They have like the pastel colored sort of slides that they put on the reading materials and it stops the words moving around. So that's one thing. Also, the SIA, the awarding body in the UK and others, they make allowances for people with conditions like that. So they'll get more time at their exams and everything else. All of the exams are recorded anyways. But I just think that you can only do so much practical, really, without fully understanding what it is you're doing. So
Exactly.
it's difficult because, yes, a lot of people do feedback that there should be more practical, but that's just because they don't enjoy it more. And I know they're paying money to do our courses, and I know they're going to come and enjoy it, and I know I'll be trying to.
But what I find it is knowledge, as I see already, even from me reading part of the book, like I'm got knowledge about it now, and it's like you have to understand that in certain situations it's not all about practical because you fire on adrenaline, and if you do that,
No, exactly, and that's the other thing. A lot of people, even now, I speak to people sometimes, and they don't know. I mean, I was speaking to someone relatively recently. They don't know how to conduct a threat assessment, which, as someone doing, conducting the work that we do, if they don't know how to do that, that's a real concern.
yeah,
Because they've just done a basic bodyguard course, they will go, or close protection course, they will go and they'll stand next to the principal with the earpiece in, and they'll look the part. But realistically, if something happens, they don't really know what to do.
Yeah.
So ours, like I said, ours is more, yes, it is very, very heavy, and it's not for everyone. But that's why we interview people before they come on the course anyway. And during that interview process and all the material that we provide explains that this is very theory heavy. It might not be for you. I think the opening sentence in the book is this book might not be for you. And the course is exactly the same.
yeah.
And it explains why.
And would you say that your personal experiences have shaped the course and have shaped the book?
I think it would do anyway. Yeah, it definitely has. I mean, I could sit here
I
and...
don't know if you could write a third book without personal experience.
No, I don't think you can. I don't think you can. I quite, I wanted to have some experience with it. I've been training people since 2011, and we always get feedback. I always get feedback. And after every course, we sit there, look at it, and see what we can change. And one of the things that, if it's positive, which usually is, thankfully, it's always, one of the common denominators is the instructor had a lot to, and you can read this online as well, the instructor had a lot of personal experience to give context. So because people always appreciate that, I put it into the book. I wanted to make sure that the book was written in sort of third person as much as I could. But every now and again, there's like a box that kind of adds, and it's written as I talk normally, not as I normally write. So it's more like a personal experience. There's the odd sort of swear word in there, and gives a proper sort of detailed explanation as to what happened. Although it doesn't, give names or anything like that. And it gives personal experience, I think. So I don't think you can write a book or a training program if it's not based on personal experience. So the answer is yes, but I think it kind of has to be.
And how do you ensure that the course and even writing that book, obviously you said you wrote the book over 2 years ago, how do you ensure that you still stay up to date? Because obviously there's things changing all the time, there's different rules and regulations coming in the industry you're in.
No, it's a good point. I mean, even the first book, which is is based on technology, and technology, bugging devices, for example, they update. I mean, we've got a threat research team, and these devices, you can get a new device every month. So yeah, technology wise, what I did was, when I wrote the book, and it says in the introduction, and it's a really good point that you make, because it's important to understand that you have to base it upon the basic technology in the technology-based book. So you can't sort of forward think too much, because even that become outdated. I think the answer to your question is the basis upon all of the theory has to remain the same, will remain the same.
Yeah.
And yeah, there will be changes in the future and everything else. I mean, there's one way to do it, which is create second, third, fourth editions, all the rest of it as time progresses. I don't plan on doing that, by the way, but that is one solution. But yeah, regulations will change. It talks about the law. There's a big section on the law, actually. I don't know if you've read that part yet, but you probably will fall asleep when you read it. It is quite boring. But it explains that if you are traveling as part of our job, you should research the law. You need to know it.
Yeah.
And it tells them how to do that as well. So that's applicable in terms of identifying changes in the future, regulatory, legally, and by country, but state by state.
For sure. So just before we get in depth into the book, obviously, can you just give everyone a brief overview of what was your purpose of the book? What message do you want to receive? What's it about?
I think is really a documentation of the 21-day training program as far as reasonably practicable in a book.
Yeah.
It's the longest book I've written. It includes material from the other two books I've written because they're completely relevant. But yeah, it's an overview as to how to provide adequate protection, but mainly utilizing intelligence and counterintelligence whilst protecting a principal. So it's, for me, more of a intelligence-led book, program, whatever you want to call it, as opposed to just a book. It definitively and exclusive, well, not exclusively, but it absolutely omits things like firearms, driving, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't discuss J turns and handbrake turns and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't discuss body armor and all that kind of stuff. It doesn't even discuss physical intervention, which it arguably should. But in the summary of the book, which was the most recent part of the book I wrote, I explained why I left it out. And just to give some context, that is because I don't think you can really put things like physical intervention, physically protecting an individual, in a book.
No.
It's not realistic. As much as I can get 20 photographs of people doing moves, it's just not realistic.
And would you say each individual is different and how they might protect someone?
Well, there are basic rules and procedures, and in different, country by country, there are regulations as to how you can proportionately protect someone. And again, that's one of the other reasons, because it varies so much from one country to another. I mean, between the UK and here in Dubai, it'd be totally different.
Sure.
The force that you could potentially use would be totally different.
And that's where, obviously, you said you need to research the laws. That's where that would come into place. Obviously, you're working with it. And it's also the fact that if you're learning this, would you say that you have to be adaptable? You have to learn all the different laws, because you might have numerous different clients that are different.
Yeah, so that question has two answers, really. So
Yeah.
there's the answer and direct answer, which is, I don't think it's practical for any one close protection officer to know all the laws of every country, because that would be a very difficult thing, even for a lawyer. Before going to a country that you've never been to before, you should probably know what to do, what you can do, what you can't do. You'll probably discover very quickly that without the local sort of license, you probably can't perform the role. So you're going to need the support of local.
And also, sorry to interrupt, but I'm wondering how many, if you are a close protection officer, how many clients at one time could you have? Obviously, if it's a close protection, would it be a mass amount, right?
Parents are people you're actually looking up, but principals. Yeah, that is difficult. So if you're working with a family, it's quite difficult. I think what you have to do to some extent is identify who you're really protecting.
Yeah.
If you're working with, just to give you an extreme example, if you're working with a raw family and it's like husband, wife, 2 children.
Yeah.
And there's only one bodyguard, realistically, you're going to be either with one of the children, both of the children, or the higher ranking person in that marriage. So it will be princess, prince, or crown prince, or whatever it is. So you have to, but I think, that would be made abundantly clear to you. And if it isn't, you need to understand who it is, because it's difficult, it's challenging to realistically, effectively protect a group of people like that. I've had it before where we've had like 2 celebrities, and we had a group of celebrities and we had 4 bodyguards with us, well, me and 3 others. And we had about somewhere between 2 to 3 each. And that's difficult.
Yeah.
But there was no real threat. It was just a case of, managing the crowds and all that kind of stuff. So, and paparazzi, whatever. That's difficult. I would cautiously suggest you should, as far as you reasonably can, one-on-one.
Yeah.
As far as you, or really, ideally, there should be more than one. There should be 2 to 1 or 3 to 1.
And yeah.
Going back to your question about the traveling element and the legal stuff, I just wanted to touch upon just quickly this sort of commercial piece, because I was asked this recently in another podcast about traveling with principals. In fact, that's another subject. We'll probably cover that later on. But just a quick insight is it's highly unlikely that you will travel with the principal, by the way. I mean, some people will, but if the principal's a celebrity, for example, then the likelihood of you traveling with them is very, very slim, unless you've been engaged to work with them directly as part of the tour and you'll pay for the whole tour. Because usually what happens is there's a money-saving exercise that goes on, and they will endeavor to seek support by protection from local companies.
Oh, really?
Yeah, rather than paying for the one bodyguard to travel. And there's a jurisdiction.
I would personally, if I was that hierarchy, I would want to have the same close protection, because they know me, they know how I work, and they know things that are going on. Obviously, if you're taking on someone else when you go to a new country, how are they ever going to know?
It's difficult because a lot of celebrities want, like a lot of individuals want the same.
Yeah.
But obviously the management have an input, the studio or the record label, whoever they're working for, will have an input. Because they're the ones paying for it.
Yeah.
Some celebrities, some actors will have a say. They will be firm on who is protecting them. and as part of their contract, that person has to travel with them. But there is still, and this is a bit of a funny thing actually legally, because the local law enforcement don't really sort of challenge this ever, which is where they know that people are traveling to, let's say, the UK, for example, from the US. They don't have the license to perform service over there, but nothing's really done about it, because why cause someone why disrupt a protective effort?
Yeah.
But legally speaking, they shouldn't be doing it. It's like if we got caught operating in Texas, for example, one of our lads from the UK, who British without any American, passport or license or qualification to work there, they could really find themselves in trouble unless law enforcement just kind of, okay.
Yeah.
But it's a thing. It's a thing, and I think regulators need to take care of that, because it would generate income for the economy, but not the economy. It would generate income for the industry, I think, if it was regulated better. But that's a completely different political sort of run.
So in the book also, you mentioned something, we've already briefly touched on it, but it's something that I'm quite interested in as well, the common sense bridge concept, which helps students navigate unpredictable situations and into protection. So if you can just elaborate a little bit more on that topic.
So the common sense bridge is something I came up with. There were two reasons, Ria. We had an instructor. In fact, I had a colleague I used to work with. I can't want to mention his name, but he basically had a set formula for everything. That's the way he used to teach people.
Yeah.
By the way, this guy wasn't very well versed in close protection. I used to work with him in event security when we used to do film premieres and things like that. But he somehow managed to become a close protection instructor, and he would teach people, because we used to discuss teachings. We were both qualified teachers as well. And he would say to me, look, when you teach like things like threat assessments, it needs to be formula X, Y, Z. That's how you do it. And I was like, well, yeah, but that's fine. That doesn't apply to every situation. And we had a disagreement about it, nothing serious, but just that was his view. My view was you have to be a bit more dynamic and adaptive. And again, with the students as well, what they tend to do, I don't know whether it's nerves or just be a sort of keenness to stick to what they've been taught. They tend to sort of focus on what they've learned, rather than implementing, sort of common sense in situations where they should. So what I tried to do quite early on with the close protection courses is say, look, as far as we can go with theory, you still need to apply common sense, because each situation is different. Even with the practicals that we do, things will happen out on the ground, out in the streets that we can't plan for. Some crazy person might actually come up and start engaging with the person who's playing the principal. We can't account for that. So the idea of the common sense bridge is to say, yeah, look, there's theory, but good operatives will utilize common sense to get from one theory to another, and that sort of gap is, well, that proverbial gap is sort of filled or covered, as it were, by the proverbial common sense bridge. You're utilizing common sense to get from one place to another to achieve, a general objective.
So how do you balance this within your course?
Oh, but with the practicals, I think. So, like I said, like you touched upon earlier, there's a lot of theory, and perhaps a disproportionate amount of theory, according to some. I think a lot of people argue with that, and that's fine. So it's, yes, theory. That's the black and white theory. This is what the regulators want you to do. This is what the awarding body and the government have said. This is how you should do things. But when things happen that aren't documented in the course, or what I'm delivering verbally, or what the instructors are delivering across the course, or that's written down for you to refer to, you need to be able to kind of cover that void, as it were, with utilizing your common sense. And within that should be a sort of endeavor to ensure that you're doing the right thing, you're doing things proportionately, and it's achieving your overall objective whilst operating within the boundaries of the law. So it's just a sort of way to say, look, yes, long story short, there are lots of theory, there are lots of rules, lots of protocols, standard operating procedures, but where there's not, and things happen that just aren't, you can't account for everything, can you?
Yeah.
So bridge it with the common sense bridge.
Right. Then also, so just touch on adrenaline. So the personal question I have is, how do you actually deal with adrenaline? You mentioned, I've heard of fight and flight. Yeah. Everyone's heard of that, but obviously in your book it's fight, flight, and freeze.
Yes, that's.
And then there's a lot more to it. But how? First of all, question: how do you personally deal with adrenaline?
So, in all honesty, when operating out on the ground, close protection wise, I think the hours are so prolonged that the concept that you're referring to in the book doesn't really come into play. That's just the truth. Unless you observe something and then you feel like you need to start drip feeding, which we'll discuss in a second. But the concept you're referring to in order to control the adrenaline dump, as they call it, the drip feed method is essentially something I used to use more during surveillance operations. So we made covert observations on a house, for example, where we know someone lives there who's threatened our principal. So this is quite serious. You're in a dangerous environment as it is. You need to prepare your mind and body for when that person leaves that house, because you need to do one of two things. It's either hit the record button, take clear photographs, or actually follow them in the vehicle or on foot, whatever it is. So in order to control that, it's this called the drip feed method. And there's a color code sort of reference that we have, and it's yellow, orange, and red. And the idea is that when you're in yellow, you're oblivious. Orange is something where you're preparing your mind, and red is when something's gone horribly wrong or something's happened and your body's starting to react negatively. So what happens with an adrenaline dump is that the glands that release the adrenaline are near your kidneys. And the idea of adrenaline is that it will feed blood flow to your muscles that require it, so your legs, and it will draw it away from places like your head. So you start to think less rationally. Your voice will change.
Yeah.
There's another interesting set of facts where men and women respond differently. Men start to get ready to fight, and women and run as well. But some people will freeze. Anyway, but the idea is that you drip feed yourself adrenaline, so you start anticipating something happening. So that, and you can feel it if you actually do it in a real life situation, or even if you just practice it, you will start feeling the adrenaline slightly in the sort of top of your diaphragm or your stomach. You'll feel a sort of release of adrenaline slowly. So when it does happen, when the thing that you're anticipating or know that will happens, you're more prepared for it. Yeah. And so, yeah, it will be a bigger release, but because you controlled it, your mind and your body will react better. Also, doing that whilst you're doing the drip feed, you should be thinking about what I need to do. What are my actions on drills?
Yeah.
So using the surveillance example, I need to take photographs initially, the key should be in the ignition already, but then start the engine and prepare to move. Only start the engine once they're in the vehicle and their vehicle's moving, otherwise that might raise alarm bells.
Yeah.
So it's all of those kinds of things. It's a combination of drip feeding, anticipating what's going to happen, but also recalling what you need to do step by step.
So that goes back to what you just said about the common sense, because a lot of it actually is common sense. If you've not got much common sense, then
exactly, yeah. You need to engage your mind in terms of what you need to do step by step. So your actions on drills will vary every time. No one can really tell you what they are. I mean, if they have to, there's something wrong. So yeah, it's the drip feed method does work. I've used it more in surveillance, but it's close protection. There have been scenarios actually where you can see someone acting suspiciously, and you have to start preparing your mind. At the very least, what you're going to do if what that person does do, you need to start thinking about, okay, there's the principle, fire exit, or something you can use to prevent that person approaching you. Or if you have to use brute force, then so be it. You have to use brute force to restrain that person. But yeah, it's a case of, like I say, drip feeding and anticipating your next move.
And would you say that the job role, actually, you must enjoy running off adrenaline, otherwise?
I used to. I mean, I've been retired. I retired my bodyguard license when I was in my early 30s. I used to really enjoy things that would happen. That was one of the reasons I wanted to do it, but have it as I wanted to be a bodyguard, because it was so diverse and wide ranging. You just never knew what was going to happen. So yeah, I mean, I enjoyed all of the things that would happen and all of the things that could potentially happen, and yeah, adrenaline dumps and all the rest of it. Especially when you're doing, if you're doing a combination of protective surveillance or surveillance itself or things like that. Those are really, to be honest with you, the surveillance stuff is actually more testing in terms of adrenaline and all that kind of than bodyguarding. It depends what close protection you're doing. If you're working in hostile environments, that is different. That is, you're on high alert all the time. Anything could happen, IEDs, someone could start laying down rounds in your direction, and that's totally different. I'm talking about close protection services where you're in first world countries, major cities with principals who don't have any major threat. And even if they do, it's still relatively unlikely that it's going to materialize.
And so you go down more the realistic approach on your course, which is correct. So you don't do any unrealistic training.
We don't. So what we've tried to do is keep our training as realistic as possible.
I just said you avoid, you go down more the realistic approach, that you avoid talking about things like unrealistic training, like driving, firearms, and you focus on applying skills more.
Yeah, the reason for that is because the clients that we have, to our client set, is entertainment, so celebrities, ultra high net worths, and they can have threats against them, or they could be recipients of serious threats. Also, corporate clients like CEOs of oil and gas companies and all the rest of it. When we're training our operatives to work in those situations, we don't need them to be driving around in cars on racetracks like lunatics. We don't need them to be firing fake weapons and all that kind of stuff, because in London, in the UK, or even in the United Arab Emirates where we are now, in Australia, they're just not going to be doing that. They're not. In Canada and North America, maybe that is slightly different. They may be permitted to carry a firearm, but our operatives do not carry.
I think people think of films when they think of video self-defense, and obviously not every day is like that.
No, it's not. And that's one of the reasons our training academies don't do as well as some others, because our website is probably too subtle and too honest, really happily, because we don't do the whole salesy thing. We have to, because the training academy is still a business, it has to have a turnover, but we interview people and we minimize it down to 6. We only accept up to 6 people on our course. So first of all, that's a barrier. So people don't like the fact that, I can't just book onto the course.
As it's 3 courses per year, right?
3 to 4 courses per year in each country.
And then you're qualified after that, or no?
Yes.
Okay.
So they're qualified in covert surveillance, so they can work for the surveillance company, like investigation company, technical surveillance countermeasures, so they can work for the biggest bug sweeping company in the world. We think is the biggest anyway. And they will get to travel the world with that. There really are opportunities to travel with that. Obviously, close protection, same thing. Domestic work as well as traveling opportunities, and others like counter surveillance and counterintelligence as well. They also do the medical stuff. Anyway, the point is, the training course doesn't show images on our website, people going around racetracks or firing off weapons that they're not going to get to use in real life. So I think that discourages people, because obviously other training providers will show all of these things and all of the jumping through fire and all the rest of it. And that a lot of people will be more sort of drawn towards that.
Yeah.
I think one of the benefits that we have, one of the sort of, benefit, I suppose one of the benefits our website has is because it's realistic. We only get the people that really know what they're potentially getting into. It's not all of the Hollywood stuff. It's just an actual close protection course that will deliver a program based on the work that we actually do. And that's the important thing for us to remember, and the people who are interested in attending, is that it's realistic to the work that we do, and then hopefully that you will do after, because
But that reflects on your career. Is that realistic? Like you said, like I've been lucky with this. Like not everyone's been running and jumping through hoops in this. It reflects on the course and it reflects on the book as well. It's realistic to all us.
and it's realistic to the sort of the industry in first world countries like this, like the UK, like Australia, like Canada. You're not going to be doing all that stuff. If that's what you want to do a course like it. And you honestly, we feel the disappointment afterwards, because unless you go to a hostile environment, that is not going to happen.
Yeah.
Also, you're probably not going to be driving that much as a bodyguard anyway. I mean, if you think about it logically, it doesn't make much sense.
I feel like that kind of seeps out people that you don't really want to come on the course as well, because you've got people that actually know what it's about. You're realistic. The book's realistic and it explains all the course. So therefore, it's people that actually want to go into the industry, and you're going to come out with good results. And
yeah, it's 100% correct. And we don't get people after the fact with being disappointed, because they've not been misled into a sort of world of going around racetracks in cars and handbrake turns and speeding through cities and things like that. That's just not going to happen. So exactly, yeah, that's exactly anything based on some sort of game or Hollywood fictitious nonsense, it's not going to happen. Yeah. But I don't know, people do courses like that. I don't know if they get disappointed afterwards, or how they kind of maintain that sort of adrenaline filled sort of idea that this is going to be exciting. A lot of bodyguarding stuff is quite boring. There are going to be long periods of time where you're stood in hotel corridors waiting for the principal to leave in 5 minutes, and 3 hours later you're still there. All those things happen. That's reality. That's what we try to deliver on the course, so as not to sort of mislead them into disappointment later on.
And medical training, I found this book quite interesting. You avoid giving any medical advice, right?
No, it's more that, so there are training courses that deliver a far more advanced medical qualification.
Yeah.
The minimum requirement in the UK is first aid at work. Honestly, it's okay. Yeah, it's okay, but it's not really efficient. It's not sufficient, really. Also, there's always skill fade with medical training, I find, because you don't use it. Like, how can you practice it? So,
Yeah.
it has to be. I think you have to do retraining every 3 years as well. The problem we have is because we have all the other qualifications, the TSCM, which I don't know if other training providers do, but we do ours. Our TSCM is very in-depth and technical. The advanced surveillance is very in-depth and technical. The counter surveillance is as well. There's not much room left, time-wise, for medical training, especially you've got all the close protection stuff to do as well. So we would love to do more medical stuff, honestly. Would love to have like a FREC, I don't know, they're called FREC level. There's all different qualifications now, but ours is still the basis. But what we recommend people to do after the course is do an additional medical training qualification.
Yeah.
On this course, yes, you didn't get the great medical training, but you did get all of the TSCN and all the other things I mentioned.
So we've touched briefly on it, but there's a section called preparing the mind and body for an incident. Obviously, that relates to the adrenaline part as well. And then the bit I found a bit more interesting that you can elaborate on is incident management.
Yeah. No, it does go hand in hand. Incident management is important. Again, there's a lot of common sense bridges in that element of the book from what I recall. It's a difficult thing to manage because there's a lot of information that needs to be understood. Again, this is why the course and the book is very theory heavy. It's in order to properly manage an incident, you don't need to be a trained police officer or a detective or anything like that. It's recording the incident properly, understanding how evidence could be used in court later on. Any coast protection officer, their priority is protect the principal. That's priority number one. Preservation of human life is the number one priority. So that needs to be taken care of first. Like if there's a situation where that becomes it won't become a lower priority, but if that is no longer a concern, i.e. their life is not in danger. Let's say, for example, it's a sort of minor road traffic collision. Then it's not the bodyguard's responsibility, but it would be good practice if they were able to demonstrate that they can manage and take control of a scenario. So it's things like photographing vehicles correctly, documenting registration numbers, and being able to contact emergency services if someone else needs urgent medical attention, things like that. So there's a lot of sort of protocols and processes, and in the military they love acronyms and things like that. So there's a few acronyms in there. Lionels, which is one, for example, which explains the sort of process you should adhere to when contacting emergency services, things like a location, the nature of the incident, all the rest of it. So there's all those things. And yeah, incident manager is a good thing. If you can underpin that theoretically and in practice, is a great attribute to have. Yeah. And again, that's one of those things where a lot of coast protection officers that do a training course and something happens, adrenaline kicks in because that's not been controlled, and they just don't know what to do, and it's embarrassing. So, yeah.
Well, there's no people in life, like, even if I had a small bunk, I'd be like, oh my God, what do I do? Exactly. You don't get taught these things, really.
No, you don't. And it's, fortunately on the course and in the book you do, but it's, yeah, I think it's important. So I think the incident management thing is as far as it goes with regards to, in the book at least, when something happens, this is how you should do. But I feel like the book is more sort of preventative.
But I feel like it's also good, like me reading it as someone that doesn't want to go into close protection, doesn't want to be a bodyguard or whatever, security or book speaking. I find it really interesting just to find out for myself, because I'm now thinking I'm doing surveillance. I'm really looking around. Yeah, but it's teaching me things as well, like how to control my adrenaline. And I was reading bits and I was thinking that's actually good to put into regular life as well. Yeah, you don't have to just be interested in this to read about this.
Yeah, no, I think a few people have said that in the past with the books. There are some interesting parts to it. I mean, I feel like I would have thought you had to be interested in the subject matter, but obviously you sort of suggested that's
I was nice to hear. Having a great time.
Yeah, that's nice to hear.
But also I was telling my friends about it as well, and this is what I mean. I'm quite intellectual, but if I've read it from a point of not wanting to go into it, but now I'm telling my friends about it earlier, and she's like, oh my God, it's actually so interesting. Like, people are very interested in the topics, and it's also good, like, as a woman, to know how to protect yourself. Sense.
That is an interesting topic, because the industry needs more women. I've said it publicly. It was documented. I think it was mentioned in the Daily Mail interview that I did. They kind of touched upon it a lot because she was a female journalist, And, we're always trying to pay women in the industry, least of all because we need them. But there are selfish reasons. We get a lot of clients from this region, the Middle East, to the UK, and a lot of those female principals, they can't have male bodyguards with them.
No.
And the husbands won't allow it culturally. It's not really done. And also, to be honest with you, I'm not just saying this because you're a woman, but women do sometimes have better attributes than men. So obviously, there's no point in pretending men and women have different attributes that sort of outweigh each other. But
so I know how women work in a sense.
They know women.
Men, like you've heard the comment that men can never work out women to this day, or women can never work out women. But like I
feel like women can work out men. I just feel like it's so worried about.
Yeah, but like as a male protection bodyguard, how would you work out how a woman wants to work, how a woman's mind working? Like you could have a woman attacker. You never know.
Yeah, I mean, we're never going to work out. But I mean, what?
It would be to have more women in the industry.
It would be.
And obviously,
no, women are better at. I think women make great undercover operatives as well.
We're great at finding out.
Yeah, that one. So desk-based investigations, very, very good. But actually, undercover covert surveillance operatives, the female operatives I worked with, unbelievable.
Girls reading this book, it might be painful because you're surveillance side on your boyfriend.
Oh yeah, oh my god, yeah. Just let the men down, haven't I? No, but women also, I think women deal with conflict better.
Yeah. To
some extent, obviously, if they're trained highly in martial arts and physical self-protection as well, that's obviously beneficial. There are other attributes. I honestly believe that women make. People are going to hate for this, but I'm not trying to be woke, by the way. I'm really not. I think women make better leaders because they have a sort of more rationalized thought process, where ego isn't as a bigger factor as it is for men.
Yeah.
So I feel like that does give a better sort of leadership attribute. If there was a team of bodyguards and there had to be a female bodyguard, I would, if she was experienced as all the others, I would cautiously suggest that the female should be the team leader.
I think it goes down to as well, like from me that's not had much experience with this. When I think of bodyguard, you think of like scary man, protection, and that's not always necessary, really.
We always try and avoid that.
Yeah,
we can't ask people on the phone how they physically appear because there's a moral sort of element to it as well. We can't sort of say to them, are you someone that looks like they take too much steroids and spend 4 hours a day in the gym? Do you look aggressive? Do you look you can't ask people that. But in all honesty, that is what we're trying to avoid. And it's not personal. It's the sort of presentation that we try to give as a business is the sort of slim, smart looking individual, but more that, very capable, athletic build, who is capable of protecting an individual, but also can blend in as a business associate or something else with the principal.
Yeah.
A lot of our principals want that. They don't want big,
no,
like, that kind of appearance.
And maybe if it was more women, people wouldn't even think that that's your.
No, and that's
it'd be great as well.
It's with a lot of men, so it depends where they're from, obviously, because there are cultural things. You're unlikely to get a man from Africa, for example, who would want a female bodyguard. That is extraordinarily unlikely.
Yeah,
that's just because that's a culture.
In general, though, I think as a man having a female bodyguard, a lot of men have just got their egos. They wouldn't ever feel protected by women because in the natural nature, it is men that protect women.
Yeah,
and
that is true.
Trains.
That is true. So it depends on the individual, I guess. But yeah, a lot of female principals do prefer. I'll be honest, a lot of female principals prefer to have a male. Yeah. And we've had clients before, even on ones I've been dealing with. I said, "Would you prefer a male or female?" Like, what do you mean? Yeah, it's not the question. I need a male. I need a man, right?
Yeah.
So, but there are cultures and there are standards and there are situations where they have to have a female. Either it's a blend in or it's a cultural issue or religious matter, whatever it is. But like I say, I think it's. For a lot of women, they just, like you alluded to, they will see it always as a male-dominated sort of environment, one where they are not welcome, where they don't feel like they could progress. But actually, from what, our sort of experience shows that women actually get paid more. And the reason for it is because they're far and fewer between. Mm-hmm. And the ones that are in the industry that have done well, obviously, they're more experienced. So there's a higher demand. So when you need them, and it usually is last minute as well, so they can sort of demand more money.
Yeah.
I don't want to give figures because then this kind of conversation will go out of date quite quickly as the situation takes place. But there is a bit of a disproportionate amount of money that men will get paid as a female bodyguard, to be honest with you. And that's usually only for short-term operations, honestly. But yeah, that is a factor that a lot of people don't
I
realize.
think it's good to get away from the fact of why can't a woman not do it as well? Do you know what I mean?
Women can do it. It's just the preference of the principle is the main barrier, honestly.
And I do think it is second nature to have men as protection in life.
Yeah, for a lot of women as well, by the way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it's you sisters have got to look out for each other. But I think it's more like, honestly, women should not be discouraged by this concept that they don't have the attributes to be effective bodyguards, because they do.
Yeah.
They don't have all of the attributes the men do, but that is not necessarily a bad thing, right? That you got to turn around and look at the positives. And if either you're working with a man, obviously we have both benefits of what both genders kind of can offer. But even as standalone individual operatives, it works.
That's women for surveillance. I think incredible.
Yeah, they are incredible. I'm telling you, like I don't know how many surveillance operations.
Things I can find out about my exes is crazy. So
I know. Open source intelligence now is just like you set the door up to a multitude of other things, and people can do it. It's a lot easier now. But back when I was doing it, that was not as easy. But Instagram didn't exist. Facebook was.
Yeah.
Still, it was around. It was pretty primitive. In fact, it was better actually, because it was less private. Believe it or not, and search features that they don't have now. But yeah, no, it's I think women have a better investigative mind.
But that's what I wanted to touch on as well briefly. The different ways it mentions it in your book that you can communicate, because obviously now there's a lot. We've got WhatsApp, we've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, we've got all this going on. But like, as a bodyguard, what's the different ways that you can communicate through that?
Historically, it's been two-way radios.
Yeah.
We'll think about the earpieces when we think about close protection, the curly-whirly earpieces, that is, and they still use those. But if it's... And they're effective, by the way, I have to say that if it's low-profile security, even high-profile security, the curly-whirly earpieces are very effective, or just two-way radios in general are effective. It allows to be both high profile and relatively low profile, because they're supposed to go behind the head. They're not supposed to be dangling down like you see in the films and programs like A Bodyguard that the BBC made. But moving away from that, if it's a very, very low profile operation, then voice over internet protocol, which is what WhatsApp uses when you do WhatsApp calling, that's very effective because it's live and it's constant and it's two-way. It's primed to be live in the sense that you don't have to wait for one person to finish transmitting their message before you can send your message.
Yeah.
So it's effective, and obviously data, the use of data is becoming less and less now in the Western world. So people can make long WhatsApp calls in a group of people and communicate with up to 10 people live through things like WhatsApp calling and things like that. So it's it's beneficial, but also there's still the old sort of fashioned, the traditional methods of actual just verbal communication if it's a tight knit group and there's no need for distance.
And how do you differentiate low profile and high profile? Is there different like things that you have to do for high profile, obviously compared to low profile? Obviously, I see something about no black shirts, one of them.
Yeah, there's a few personal preferences in what should be worn. I think I mentioned about there's this thing that a lot of people in the security industry, specifically when they come from sort of door supervisor level and but they sort of got this habit wearing things like what you might call cargo pants, cargo pants, like combat trousers, things like that. In code protection, that's just a no-no. They look absolute dog shit. So low profile is basically where you could blend in and be part of the group. So if you think male actor, right, he'll have manager, PR person, bodyguard, maybe someone else, maybe a friend, maybe a girlfriend, I don't know. So as part of that group, the bodyguard in a low profile setting can blend in. They could be the manager.
So it's low profile setting and high profile setting, not low profile people.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. Or it could be both. There are a multitude of dynamics, right? So it could impacting factors that dictate what the bodyguard is going to be, whether it's going to be low profile or high profile. High profile, in a nutshell, right, is essentially where the bodyguard is in a full suit, arguably visible comms, i.e. the earpiece, and it is very clear from their appearance that they are providing protective services to that individual.
Okay.
That's high profile. standing outside the vehicles and all of that kind of stuff, right? A lot of our promotional material, you would see a low profile security. Low profile is sort of between that and covert security. The thing is with low profile, it touches upon both, because in some circumstances, the bodyguard will need to be seen as a bodyguard if something were to happen, i.e., a sort of influx of people coming towards the principal, whether it be fans or just a crowd of people if they're a politician or whatever it is. But they don't want to draw unnecessary attention. So the celebrities walking, or the actor, for example, is walking down the road. They don't want people to go, oh, that person got a bodyguard with them. Who's that?
Yeah.
The other way around is fine. It's like, oh, that's, I don't know, George Clooney. Oh, that person actually must be a bodyguard. So it's definitely him. That way around, it is sort of more preferable for the individual, for the principal. In answer to your question, what the difference is just appearance mainly and the way they behave.
Okay.
And I think the equipment they would have, such as earpieces, that kind of stuff.
And so what would you say that your people's misconception is with close protection? Obviously, I've got a lot of misconceptions. What would you, like, how am I trying to say this? So what is the biggest misconception that people have about close protection, and how in your course do you address this?
I think one of the biggest misconceptions that people have is the appearance. So people who say to me, you don't look like God.
Yeah.
Well, how many of you met? Like, it's just, you draw.
As we say, people think people should be big and this and the other.
Especially when I was younger, I was like really, like, I was a lot slimmer.
I read that in your article that you were saying I was so slim, like blah blah blah.
I just didn't look. I didn't look the part. I was tall, so that sort of worked in my favor. But yeah, I think people assume the bodyguards are exactly what we say. Like basically, if you visualize a doorman, well, not even all doormen. This is not detrimental to door supervisors or anything like that. People think doorman, they think big guy who's capable of stopping whoever coming in and have a scrap whenever it's required. And that's not always the case for the bodyguards. It's not always the case for door supervisors as well. But that's the biggest misconception. People say you don't look like a bodyguard. However, for us, it works in our favor. So we try to market to our clients. If you want that kind of image, that's not us. We can't provide that service. If you want, people do contacts? Say, look, I want a big or 4 big guys to protect them. It's like, yeah, good, I'll swear. You have to look for another company. It's just not us. Despite how much you want to spend, that's not what we provide. Our operatives are intelligent, athletically built, but very, very capable of providing a protective service. So I always remember there was a guy I know called Paul. He was one of Take That's bodyguards. He was with Take That for many, many years. I think he might still be, actually, as and when they tour. But I remember he had a sort of barometer and said, how many people here do you think could pick up their principal and run out of the building with them? And some of the bigger lads might have been able to do it. They probably wouldn't be able to run very far because they're not very athletic. They're just big. And yeah, that's a kind of good measurement as to what close protection officers should be able to do. Pick them up so they're capable of picking someone up and fighting someone off if necessary, absolutely necessary, and running for a prolonged distance or up and down stairs with someone on their back. That's a kind of good, I think, but it's still a good barometer of how, I tried to get Paul to contribute to the book, but he didn't want to. I don't think he was, he didn't feel like contributing. I think he was a bit shy, I don't know. But
for me personally, I think if I was going to have body part, I would go more down the intelligence route because my common sense is quite poor. I think in a room, you need to have someone that can read a room. It's okay being able to fight someone, but you're not going to be able to use your intelligence like we've mentioned and like it mentions in the book, the common sense theory, basically. So I'd want someone that could probably walk in a room and know already if there's a threat in there or not.
In the US, I think you still get large sort of amount of operatives in the kind of bodyguard, close protection arena, but are the kind of big lads. But like you said, their job big. They're not very highly trained. Some are. Don't get me wrong, some are. But they're typically speaking,
They can just fight.
Yeah. Well, some not even. Some just act as a deterrent. If they, I mean, if they had one of sort of the kind of close protection operatives that we have, and one of them, arguably one of ours would win it.
But you could have intelligence that you know how to do different skills in a fine scenario rather than just a fight.
Exactly. And, identifying a threat before it happens is arguably more important, because if that one person if someone manages to put him down, that's it. That was the last line of defense. Whereas engaging your brain and your skills and all the rest of it, soft skills and hard skills, as they say.
It's an art, like we said. It's art representing,
Awful.
I heard you are. And so what advice would you give to someone? Obviously, the book is full of the ins and outs of the course and your experience. Obviously, the book's written about your experience. But what advice would you give someone just starting out in the close protection industry?
I think it's critical to pick the right course. I'm not trying to sell our course, but you need to do a course that you know is going to be relevant to you. If you want to go into hostile environments, the likelihood is that one of the criteria you're going to need to have is be ex-military. So you've got that. Okay, that's fine. But you need the coast protection license for whatever reason. Then do a hostile environment course, right? Make sure you get the weapons handling, all the rest of it, because it's not going to be the same weapon system you used in the army. So that's important. Get the right course. If you're not sure, do research. I think finding the course and doing the correct course is absolutely critical. I know in the UK, there are some companies that won't employ people from certain training providers. We don't have that problem. We only recruit from our own. But I know that there are others that won't recruit specifically from others because it's really, they're based on all of the things we talked about in the negative sense. I think that's critical. Be prepared to learn other skills. I wouldn't honestly advise them to learn a language at this point because one, you don't know who you're going to work with, and secondly, you'd be surprised at the amount of foreign clients who don't want you to speak that language. There are benefits to learning another language, but I would cautiously suggest you hold off until you've got some experience, because I think what you'll find is that, but I know this to be a fact, a lot of our clients don't want the person to understand their private conversations.
That surprises me.
Yeah, it did me as well. It did me because, when I first started out, I was going to learn Arabic because of, the influx of the Arab Spring and all the rest of it. And I kind of held off, and then I started working with Russians, and it was made very clear to me, if you speak Russian, it's not going to be advantageous.
No.
So just don't bother. But, if you're working with them all the time, you learn vicariously. You're going to pick things up. And after you're working with a family for a long period of time, you build trust with them anyway. So I did learn to speak Russian. I can understand more Russian than I can speak. But sort of the summary of what I was trying to get out, there it is. Don't focus too much on learning language because it may be detrimental.
Yeah.
Be prepared for medical training. I would cautiously suggest that you look into doing something like a FREC-based qualification. If you're going to hostile environments, obviously remote medical qualifications are beneficial as well. Martial arts, I don't think you need to do martial arts, but I don't think it's definitely beneficial to have it. I started practicing martial arts when I was about 6.
I think it's good for discipline as well.
It's good for discipline.
It's good to do sports, right?
It's good. It's good in terms of keep maintaining fitness. And that's another thing. Maintaining fitness is very, very important.
Yeah.
Diet, all the rest of it, but what also you need to know is you need to be prepared for long periods of time, like long working hours, and don't be disheartened when some of those long hours are very, very boring, because a lot of the time you're going to be stood, like I said earlier, in hotel corridors, in a car, outside of a house, during the day, during the night. It's going to be very boring. Prepare for that. And I would say, I've never calculated this, I would probably say about 20% of the work we do is actually working with the principal. Unless they're in any part of the country or wherever you're working with them for a short period of time, they need to get a lot done. But if you're working with someone long term, then a lot of the work you do, I think, will be fit into 20%. The remaining 8% is just waiting around and sort of preparing things and all the rest of it. So, but the 20% is amazing. Usually, the thing you get to see and do and learn are unbelievable. So, great career, very interesting, very diverse, very dynamic, very proactive in terms of travel and all the opportunities you'll have. But yeah, it's long hours. It's not great for social lives. It's not great for any romantic relationships that you might be involved with. If you've got children, you need to take that into account. But yeah, there's a multitude of things that go on, but those are the main things I would sort of say that you need to take into account before deep diving into a career like this.
And how do you see the future of close protection training evolving?
The training I don't see evolving massively.
No.
I think it depends how far in the future you want to go. Honestly, I was thinking about writing a future-based chapter in the book.
Yeah, because obviously there's so many new things being thrown in, like AI, everything now.
AI. So I would say diversify quickly. Will bodyguards be replaced by robots? I think is the ultimate question, which sounds a bit nuts in 2025, but
Crazy, but
maybe towards the end of 2025.
I think actually robots in divide.
Yeah, yeah. So you'll see robots in Dubai. Robots can act quicker than us. They can think quicker than us. Even if they can't now, they will be able to very, very soon.
Yeah.
They'll be able to run quicker than us. They'll be stronger than us. Will we be replaced by robots? Yeah, I think so. When, I don't know. I think it's, I mean, unless humanity just says no, right? I don't want a robot near me, then that's fine. I think realistically, in the next 10 years, I can't imagine people are going to have on a robot next to them as a bodyguard walking down the street because one says, I've got a bodyguard robot.
Yeah.
But they will be more effective than us. So in 20 years, maybe we will be replaced. I don't know. So if you are in this industry or you look into this industry, diversify as quickly as you can.
Yeah.
And I know people might be watching this thinking he's a nutcase, but how can we not be replaced?
Yeah.
It's going to happen.
But it's all evolving. Like, it's going to have to be human that's going to have to create that robot, bro.
Yeah, so you could actually use your skills to.
Yeah, if you're that way inclined, look at, get involved in AI or get involved in, but we're lucky, security is quite wide ranging. Bug sweeping, we were talking about this recently. I don't think for a long time people are going to want robots coming to their house to do a bug sweep. I just can't imagine. I can't see it because will they be able to trust them, right? Will they be able to be manipulated? Probably. Will they be able to be hacked? Yeah, almost certainly. We can hack anything.
Yeah.
So there's that dynamic to it. I think humans will be involved with bug sweeping for a long period of time. So maybe get hold of bug sweeping. I don't know. I could be completely wrong. Right? It'd be interesting to watch this in 20 years' time. When I'll be...
That'd be a robot doing the podcast.
Yeah, probably will. Probably will, yeah. But diversify quickly. Cybersecurity is very interesting. That's part of the security industry. Honestly, I feel like I don't want to give advice, but in that sense, because I could be wrong,
Yeah.
It's interesting in the future.
You kind of already touched on it. I was just going to ask you, what new skills do you think will be crucial for future operatives?
Skills, I don't know, honestly. As it is now, any close protection officer can build on what they have. I tell you, this might be off topic slightly, but a great skill set to have is nonverbal communications, the ability to read people's body languages.
Yeah.
It touches upon it in the book, but I don't go into it massively because I'm not an expert I'm not a body language expert. I've been training reader body language, but I'm not an expert.
I know someone that's really researched themselves in this. And also, when somebody knows that you can read their body language, the way that this person will never lie to you, never do this and never do that, even if you only know a little bit of it, is absolutely beyond me.
Yeah. It's so interesting. It's beneficial for close protection operatives to know, and it's a skill set that can be definitively utilized. In the set, in the context of being able to identify someone who's likely to commit an attack compared to who's not likely to commit an attack, or the principal's in a meeting and you just happen to be in there and you can see someone in the boardroom blatantly lie, but the average human can't. You can maybe later inform and say, I think they're concealing something from you, even though it's not really their business. As a bodyguard, you can, it might be a slight benefit. Who knows? But also, it's just very, very...
But that's where also your common sense bridge comes in, because it's knowing when to know your mark as a bodyguard. And like you've said, some people might take that the wrong way and be like, you're a bodyguard. Like, why are you telling me about this?
And a lot of people do that as well.
Yeah.
You're a bodyguard, and also you're just here to protect me. You're not particularly intelligent. But it depends on the relationship you have with the principal.
For sure.
Yeah, that's the difficult thing. It's this concept that you as a bodyguard are not highly intelligent. You're not particularly clever in any part of what you do. You're just...
But I'd say, I think from reading your book, that's where it's changed. Like, your course has changed. Like, obviously you've got intelligence is a massive role in it.
Yeah.
Like we were saying before, it's not just about protection. And these are what all you teach on the course.
Yeah. I've tried to get in the book to be more that way inclined, rather than, just enabling bodyguards to be kind of labeled as muscle. And someone there just to react if something happens. That's not realistic. If something happens and they have to react, that's one thing. But if they react badly or don't react at all or react ineffectively, it's too late. The principal gets harmed, and the number one overall and objective is being complete and utterly demolished. So, it's for us and for me, I think it's more promote the intelligence, promote the kind of diversity of the bodyguard's mind, and promote intelligence within our sector.
Would you say that from experience you learn a lot more? Like you say, you've had the same before, you learn on the job. Like, no one can ever throw anything at you. You can teach so much, but even like you said, going away and having little benefits, like going away and teaching yourself this, going training in the gym, obviously it all entwines with how good you're going to be.
Yeah, I do agree with that, which is, again, goes back to the reason why I want the course to be theory heavy, because you will learn so much in the field, as it were, that you can't be taught that kind of stuff in the book, in any book, any training program. You just don't know. And also, you might go down a totally different career than I went to. So I can't teach you that kind of stuff. I can't teach you what it's like to, work with a Chinese family, because I've never worked with a Chinese family. There are going to be cultural things that you'll learn. So that's just one minor example.
Yeah.
I can't tell you what it's like to work in hostile environments because I've never done it. Thankfully, I regret not doing an operational tour of duty, but I've never worked in a hostile environment. But so yeah, I don't think you can tell people what they would experience. The answer to your question, yes, you will learn so much on the job that you just can't be taught. Hence why get the theory underpinned, put it into a bit of practice on the course, but recognize it's still a training program. The scenarios you're in are fictitious, albeit out on the ground and in real life environments, like in Mayfair, Knightsbridge, and in Sydney's CBD or whatever. Yeah, those are slightly realistic, but it's still controlled. When you go out the ground, you will learn so much throughout the duration of your career. No training program, no book can kind of tell you everything you should do or what you're going to learn, but it's unrealistic. So yeah, you will learn more on the job, of course.
Can I ask you a personal question, you might think? It's basically, I was going to say, why do you actually regret doing a tour of operations? A lot of people would look at, if I sit here and if you go and research the articles on you and what you've done and what you've created from that level, a lot of people would just finish their career and not go on to want to teach other people to go into the same industry. And obviously, you've got 3 books now. Like, it's very inspirational. But your one regret is that. Why is that?
Not doing an operational tour of duty was a big regret of mine because I was a trained soldier and I was physically capable of doing it. And I wanted to serve my country. My country's done wonders for me. Being British, a lot of young people, I don't think realize until you travel abroad. And in our industry, and I think other industries as well, the British standard is always considered so high. So whether you're working in North America, West Africa, Australia, wherever it is, Far East, Singapore, Hong Kong, being British, you are there by default.
And then you expect everyone to speak British as well.
Yeah, exactly. And they do.
Yeah.
So just being British and speaking English has done wonders for me. It's given me a career and, let's be honest, income and business that's able to thrive just because of where I was born. So, and I was physically capable. They paid a lot of money. Being in the armed forces, you're obviously, they invest a lot of money. You as a soldier. And so to kind of leave that because I was disappointed with one individual, one sort of set circumstances. Yeah, I just, obviously, I noticed, and I said this in another podcast that I did, but this is very easy to me to be sat here doing a podcast saying I really regret it. And I know a lot of ex-squaddies, veterans in general can look at this and just laugh. And that's absolutely the case because it's easy for me to sit here now and say that.
Yeah.
But I genuinely regret not going to do an operational tour. Yes, risking my life. I may not come back. I may not come back in one piece. But I feel like I would have fulfilled something within me that I now can't.
But do you think you would have gone down maybe a different route and not had the opportunity that you've gone on to do since that?
No, because it's relevant. I think it's relevant because I think it would have been with the Royal Military Police, who are the regiment that do close protection operations within the armed forces. It would have been an operational tour, a close protection operational tour. That is something different. That's called a black tour. I think it's a totally different process. But what probably would happen if I'd have done an operational tour and come back in one piece, then I probably would have gone on to a close. Hopefully, I wanted to progress to the close protection unit within the Royal Military Police, which is, as far as I'm concerned, I think a lot of people will agree, other than from the SAS and perhaps the SBS, is the highest training qualification training program you will do with regards to close protection. Some will argue it's the Secret Service in the US for the president. The presidential protection and all the rest of it. But again, on my view, and I think a lot of people agree, is the British standard is the highest. So I think my career may not have done so much in the private sector because I would have been focused more on the public sector work, as in with the armed forces. Yeah. But who knows? I mean, I would have regretted it. I know that I would have regretted it. But like I say, and I just want to clarify to all veterans, this is easy for me to sit here and say that I recognise that, but I do genuinely regret it. I don't regret the career I had. I've been very lucky, or arguably lucky, because I worked very, very hard. I took opportunities when they were presented to me. That's another thing. If there was an opportunity presented to me that I thought would be beneficial, I would buy someone's hands off. I'd be taking straight away, even if it was detrimental to me in terms of income, or hours that I was working that, you know, affected my social life, whatever. I always did it because I knew that I had to achieve a lot within a short period of time to become successful in this career.
Yeah.
Because it's very, very, you know, there's a lot of people trying to
Very competitive.
It's very expensive. Yeah.
And what inspired you for this third book? Like, why? What? Even the first book? Why a book?
Well, there are a couple of things. I think credibility is one. You know, so I wrote the training courses. So writing a training program takes a long time.
Yeah.
I think that people learn in different ways. There are 4 ways of learning. There's BARK. They call it BARK. There's visual, audio, which is listening, reading, obviously, and then kinesthetic. The training courses are supposed to deliver all 4 of those, but I think document it in a book, it just has. It has. I didn't realize it, honestly. I wrote the first book. I wanted to write a series of books. Why? I don't really know. I think just to document what I've done.
Yeah.
In a more formalized way. So the training program I can write and I can teach someone to deliver, but it's never going to be a book, is it?
I think it's more like, for me, you know, when someone says, "I'm good, you've got to go on this training course," like if you're not really fully into it, it's a bit daunting.
Yeah.
It's a bit like, it sounds intense. Whereas as a book, it's like you can read it whenever you like.
Yeah.
You can pick it up, you find it interesting, then you might want to go and do this or that and the other.
Yep.
And I like the way that you've actually written the book. That it's not major long chapters like we said before. Like, it's small sections. It's easy to read.
Good. Well, I'm glad you said that. I was worried you would not off us read it because
and I'm not a book reader, and I'm not even just preaching that. When you said, "Can you read the book?" I was like, "Yeah, we'll give it a go." You have an audio book.
Yeah, I know, because I don't know if to do an audiobook version of it, but so I didn't realize this after releasing the first book. Sorry, my credibility factor in TSCM just went from, you know, there to here, and there are obviously benefits to it. All profits from the book go to the charity that I created and founded, the Vanquish Foundation. But so it's not about selling the book for me. I think it's about documenting what I've done in my career, but also the close protection training program. There was always going to be a series of books. When I did the first, I was always going to do the surveillance course book. So the TSCM course was originally 3 days. It's longer now.
Yeah.
So that was not easy to write because it's very technical, but it was documented. It was done. Then I wanted to do the 5-day course, which is the surveillance one. So I did that. That was slightly more technical. Now I wanted to do the 21-day course, but I could leverage the other 2 books a little bit. But I didn't anticipate taking as long as it has. It's taken not full time, of course, but I started writing it in on these. I think it was the 17th or the 15th of August, 2022. So about 2.5 years now that I completed it, only recently. So it's taken longer than I wanted it to take, honestly. But I just think there's value in documenting what you know.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
You can't beat real life experience.
No, and I just think, you know, if in your career, if you're gonna work hard and achieve a lot, document is a wonderful thing to have. It's a great thing to have.
Definitely. Even if it inspires one person, it's one person with more than you.
Yeah, and it builds credibility for the business as well. So there are monetary factors, but I won't be worrying for a long time on anything. I think I'm probably done now for a while. It's taken me such a long time, so much of my time.
Yeah.
And it's not an easy thing to do. So
it's easy for people to pick up and think, "Oh, a book," but then they don't realize what's actually gone in behind the book.
No, I mean, when I see fictitious books like the Harry Potters and they're that fake, I'm like, the fact that someone wrote that and they're hardly him.
It's a story as well. Yours is real life experience. Yours is teaching. That's like I was watching a Netflix the other day, and I thought, you know, to actually think of a film, like a horror movie, and to actually write a whole movie and think of a scene, and then you have to write what people are saying because you've got actors, actresses. Like, that's a lot.
It's a lot. I don't know how they do it. I don't feel I could write a fictitious book. A novel. I don't think I could do it.
No.
I've got a couple of ideas. I never would do it. I just don't think it's within me. I don't think I'm descriptive.
But I think it's great that you said you've got this dyslexia before and you've actually got 3 books now as well.
Where's numerical dyslexia?
Yep.
So it's not like traditional dyslexia.
Numerical art.
Yeah. So it's if you give me a handful of money, it's going to take me a very long time to count. I get so I mean, if no one understands what this calculator is, it's dyslexia with numbers. So it's like I said, I can't count that well. If I try, I always get dates wrong. So I calculated recently about every year I lose somewhere between £3,000 to £6,000 a year on incorrect dates, incorrect flight dates, hotel dates, hotel bookings.
No way.
Yeah.
But then you still had the close protection career, because that revolved a lot around dates and surveillance, especially.
Yeah, you have to really keep a check on yourself. So, and utilizing and relying upon digital calendars a lot, and then double checking it, getting someone else I have to get someone else to check. If I'm booking a flight, I have to someone else with me and make sure they've double checked what I'm booking.
Yeah.
And there are times it's like, no, that's next month. So that happens so easily for me. So it's numerical dyslexia. It's not anything to do with words, thankfully. I would rather be that way around, to be honest. I think I'd be quite disappointed if I had that. My brother's, he's quite dyslexic, with what it's just traditional dyslexia, if you like. But yeah, mine's just with numbers.
Yeah.
But the page numbers, they were easy to do, so that's fine. They all think to do themselves. So
exactly.
there was actually, the funny thing is, writing the book. So all of the, if you want to do it formally and properly, you have to number each image. And I can't remember how many images there are, but that honestly took me about 2.5 hours to do that, just to number.
Yeah.
Because I had to keep going back for myself. And was that last one 33? Now do I do 33? So, and then was it 66 or was it 33? So that took a while. And that was where I had to go to a coffee shop, sit down, deep breath, and then just go into it. So, I'm just numbering images. That's what I had to do. But yeah, that was the most. Yeah, I've done it. Well, I don't know who paid it you. Well, I don't know. It might be wrong. Who knows?
That's all for today. Thank you for joining us on this episode discussing the book, The Art of Protection, and we look forward to you joining us again next time.